In the meantime here, let's talk about this with our friend at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Joe Truzman. He joins me. Joe, thanks for being with us, and hope you have had a good weekend here. This is moving all very fast. Obviously, Blinken has been in the region for several days now, and he is open to, working with, cooperating with the rebel group in order to prop them up and stabilize them. That's a tall order. I mean, what does that look like here? The Associated Press has it that Blinken and his counterparts in the region meant to guide Syria's transition to a peaceful, non-sectarian, and inclusive country. We're just a week after the fall of the Assad regime here. Is that a far-fetched dream that Syria can become a democracy or not?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. Is it a dream? I wouldn't say it's a dream, but it's definitely a tall order. We have to be honest with ourselves here. These rebel groups are jihadist groups, all right? Some of these, especially HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, who led the counteroffensive, or rather the offensive against Bashar Assad's regime. They're leading this, right? Their leader, Jalani, is registered or has been sanctioned by the United States as a terrorist. So, yes, it's a tall order. And let's be honest here, asking jihadist groups to somehow change their ways and lead a democratic state in the Middle East, that's going to be difficult. Now, I don't say it's impossible, but it's a tall order, I think.
So the U.S., the U.K., and France just this weekend have signaled a willingness and an openness for dialogue to talk with, maybe cooperate's too strong of a term here, with HTS. But to your point, HTS was once an affiliate of al-Qaeda. It's been designated as a foreign terrorist organization by the U.S. State Department since 2018. That designation, to your point, carries severe sanctions, including a ban on the provision of any material support to the group or its members. How will we work with them if any cooperation with them is banned because of this designation?
That's a very good point. How are we going to do this, right? Now, there could be a possibility that the sanctions are rescinded. However, I think that's a dangerous path to go down on. So I wouldn't recommend it, to be quite honest with you. I think with these groups in Syria, especially HTS, the United States government needs to see action, right? We don't want words, we want action, we want to see actual reform. But that's going to take time. It's not going to take 10 days or a couple of weeks or months. It's going to take a while. So this will be, I think, the next president, President Trump, will have to deal with this issue. But for now, I think I would be very cautious to rescind any sanctions on these organizations.
So the Associated Press has it that the sanctions do not, however, legally bar U.S. officials from communicating with designated groups. So I thought that was an interesting caveat here. On Blinken's part and Jake Sullivan's part, is it somewhat of a futile effort here now that we know that President-elect Trump has said as much last weekend, that the United States should not be involved in whatever comes of the new Syria? I wouldn't say it's... Will his hand ultimately be forced, once he takes the presidency in January here? Is he not going to have a choice?
Perhaps, but I don't think it's futile. Now, the problem here is I think the United States, what they're trying to do is stabilize the region. We have to remember the region, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and other nations there. They've been in a war for more than a year now, right? There's been conflict that they've been involved in. So nevertheless, this fall of Bashar al-Assad's regime was I would describe it as something that nobody really expected. So there are a lot of fears there, right? Especially in Jordan, especially in Israel, right? That jihadist groups will get their hands on weapons and create problems. So I think what the United States is doing right now, more than anything, calming those fears. They're trying to lead, all right? And I think that's the right thing to do. However, this does pose a problem for the incoming president, President Trump, right? What are they going to do? What promises that the United States are going to make? Are they going to make any promises during these next few weeks to, let's say, HTS, for example? Yeah. That's a problem. So I think HTS right now, if I were in their shoes, they're probably looking at the United States and saying, well, we'll listen, but we don't believe you until the next president comes in, and then we'll hear what he has to say.
Okay, yeah. It's just so interesting how in just a week's time, the complexion of Syria has changed so much here with regard to so many regional partners. The leader of Hezbollah coming out this weekend saying essentially their weapons supply route that went straight through Syria, that's gone. The Russian presence so minimal now in Syria, all but an echo and shadow of what it once was. And I want to talk about Turkey's role because I think they're kind of the shadow player in all of this. I've spoken with experts like yourself that, Turkey really had an outsized role here. And lest we forget, there are so many kind of rival factions and groups in Syria. These Kurdish fighters in Syria that the United States has backed. Turkey doesn't like them. So what's Turkey's role going to be? What do you think Blinken's message was to Turkey about that?
Right. I think there absolutely is a Turkish role here. The Turkey does back some of these organizations, these armed groups that are allied with HTS that ended up toppling Bashar al-Assad. So, but I think Turkey has always had a problem for some years now with Assad. Right now that Assad is gone, Turkey, they may have some ideas there, right, for the future of Syria. But if the United States wants to lead, especially in this region, I think communication with Turkey, right, is very important. But we have to remember, Turkey backs some bad groups, not only jihadist groups, but groups like Hamas, for example, right? So I'd be quite suspicious about what Turkey's going to do next in Syria. But nevertheless, that dialogue should be there. But right now, more than anything, I think Turkey, Lebanon or Iraq or Jordan, they're just waiting and seeing what happens next. Because again, this has been just a couple of weeks now that all of this happened. Things are moving quite quickly.
So, Joe, do you feel, though, that it is stabilizing in Syria? Or do you feel that there's some type of scramble for Syria going on right now? And maybe you're right. I mean, maybe it's just too early to tell.
Right. The good news is I don't see significant issues, right? I don't see, for example, armed groups going fighting each other, okay? There's not a lot of that. There's very little evidence of that. However, there are fears, especially in Jordan and in Israel, that these new organizations that are going to be running Syria are going to turn their sights on them. Okay, so I think, but that's something that will probably happen in the long term.
Okay,
but in the short term, I think they are stable for the moment. All right, but I caution you when I say that. But things can change at any moment. So we have to see. Again, this all has happened very quickly. So the next day can bring something else, but something to really keep your eye on. That's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, Secretary of State Blinken said this today. We have been in contact with HTS and with other parties. So, I mean, I know these are kind of small, minor developments on the surface, but that seems to be, pretty big to see whether or not the United States, what our role will be in kind of welcoming a new Syria into, the world of nations here. Western journalists like our own Trey Yanks and others, they're getting into Syria and they are talking to Syrians. And Western journalists have not been able to get into Syria for more than a decade here. And just to end, I think it's so telling that no one has heard or seen Bashar al-Assad since he fled. He has not issued any memorandum, message, speech, what have you. He just got out of Dodge under the cover of night. And to me, that just goes to show you, how fast this collapse was and what the Syrian people really thought of him, right?
Yeah, I believe so. More than anything, I think it's a huge reflection on his leadership, all right? And also, and touching on what you said, that I think more than anything, at least since the Syrian civil war, that he's been essentially propped up, right, by Russia, by Iran. So when they didn't come to help him during this event in the last couple of weeks, he was toppled, right, and then he fled, reportedly to Moscow. So, but yeah, it tells you a lot about him.
All right, Joe Truzman there with the FDD. Joe, can't thank you enough. Have a good rest of your Sunday. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.